the Privy Council's ruling on the Adidja Palmer, aka Vybz Kartel, and his co-accusers' appeal, Jamaica is now looking at amending the Jury Act to discharge a jury and continue the trial, I guess, with just a judge. Once they're satisfied that the panel of jurors isn't tainted. I'm not going to get into all the details. Attorney at law Peter Champagny, KC, is here with us, and that's why he's here. He will enlighten us and discuss some of the implications. Good morning.
Good morning,
Peter. Always a pleasure to have you.
Yes.
I want to start, first of all, with what is the Jury Act?
Well, the Jury Act is a piece of legislation that governs the whole management of jury trials in Jamaica. Presently, as it is, and I'm going to go straight to the point, it does not allow for a situation where there is an allegation of jury tampering for the judge to discharge the jury and then proceed with the trial as him being the judge and jury himself, judge alone trial. That does not happen here. The law does not provide for that. The Act does not provide for that. And in short, what has come out of this appeal from the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council is that in England and in Wales, in those countries, you have provision where once there is an allegation of tampering, the judge indicates to the relevant parties that he's minded to continue the trial, discharge the jury, and allow for the parties to make representation and then makes a decision. We don't have that in our Jury Act. So the position is, and I endorse it, that we need to look at our act and seek to incorporate it. Because this thing about jury being discharged is something that happens regularly in some instances, not necessarily allegations of tampering, but you can imagine would be a waste of resources and so on, especially when you're far gone into the evidence. So I think it's important that we look at that because I am also of the view that we are not really, I don't get the feeling that the powers that be are necessarily concerned about enhancing the whole system of juror participation and so on. And that's a larger discussion that I think we need to have on another occasion.
Yeah, very good point. To your recollection, Sir Champagny, is this the first time that this call is being echoed for this act to be reviewed?
Well, there have been calls in the past for the act to be amended, for instance, to broaden the pool of persons who can serve as jurors. But this specific situation, I believe it's the first.
Yeah. Of course, there are different aspects of the Act.
Yes.
In this amendment, I know most of it is being focused on this particular part of it because of the trial.
Yes.
Are there other things about the Act that you feel now would be a great opportunity to revise or amend?
I was very hopeful that you would ask that question, and I'm so happy for that. Yes, the answer to that is yes and yes and yes. I think, firstly, we need to broaden the scope of persons who are permitted to sit as jurors. Presently, as it is, you have, for instance, vets being excluded, and a whole list of categories of persons. That's number one. Number two, part of the problem is that when it comes to jury notice and service of it, a policeman have to find where you live. You might have moved, you're not there at that particular time, and therefore you have a low list in terms of persons being eligible from the jury pool because, police will say they didn't find you there at your location. What I'm proposing is that rather than just spending the resources for police to go all over the corporate area and in the hinterlands and byways, that you simply have a post, for instance, at the tax office, where when persons come to do business at the tax office, you're served with a jury notice. And that will reduce the efforts in terms of locating persons to serve. I think that is a very important point that needs to be made. The other thing also is that I believe that there needs to be some public education campaign about doing your civic duty. You can't have a situation where persons on social media, when a judge makes a decision, judge alone trials, they criticize the judge is this, the judge is that, and the judge is so and so. No, well, you participate. Justice is what you make it to be, and we as Jamaicans should participate in the justice system by serving as jurors.
Yeah. The last thing you said, very important, not just for the Jury Act, I think in terms of civics and how we contribute as citizens to what a society becomes and what a society is.
Yes.
I don't think we know enough of that.
No, we don't. We don't.
Yeah.
And it is sad because, as I said before, It is so important. I have never spoken to someone who has done jury duty and that individual has indicated that they will never serve again. Another thing is that this concept of jurors being reduced to persons who are from the working class and are suffering in terms of when they go to serve jury duty. You have the contrast and the conflict where persons who are businessmen and so on and businesswomen, they find every excuse
not to go,
not to serve. So I also believe, as another bit of recommendation, we need to increase the penalties for those persons and also to increase the stipend that jurors get.
Yeah. The president of the Jamaica Bar Association said that in a Jamaican Gleaner article that giving judges no other option than to continue the trial without a jury is one issue that could cause Jambar to reconsider its support for the proposed amendment. So could you explain this part?
I'm not sure I understand that because presently we have cases that judges alone try. What this legislation or this proposed amendment is about is saying, listen, in the event that there is evidence of jury tampering, after 20 days of trial, the judge would have the power to continue the trial and discharge a jury. I don't see anything that is fundamentally wrong with that. I don't see that as something that would cause the interests of justice and fairness not to prevail. So I think it's quite clear, and I think it's time that we move in that direction because, as I said, ever so often you have instances where you have a discharge of jurors based on certain allegations or otherwise.
Yeah. And so, Champagne, looking at this particular case now with Vybz Kartel and the DPP saying that she will recommend for a retrial to happen, which means, again, maybe going back to the drawing board, getting new jurors to be a part of it. This case is really high profile. How do we go about getting a jury now that's going to be fair?
I tend not to discuss cases that are not yet complete, and this is one such instance. It would be inappropriate of me to make any comments specifically referring to the case at hand. I would want to reserve my comments on that.
So let's say in the event of a high profile case, right?
Yes, yes.
How do we now go about getting jury selection that, will be fair in the matter?
Well, there can be the usual caution that is given. You can poll the jurors, or it is open to the defense to indicate that they wish to have a judge-alone trial. It doesn't have to be a jury trial, So I think that is the best way to answer the question that you're posing now. The option is always there for you to have a judge-alone trial.
Gotcha.
I think one of the things is one of the Privy Council said, or they noted, that they had considerable sympathy for the dilemma faced by the presiding judge.
Yes.
And I'll see sometimes when judges hand down their sentences, as you rightly said, people on social media will say, what did he do?
Yes.
That's not enough.
Yes.
But the judges are also guided / restricted by the laws and the acts that we give them permission.
And that is how the law evolves.
Yeah.
Judges are human beings.
Yeah.
We are not infallible. Judges are not infallible. So I don't necessarily subscribe to this notion of beating up on any one particular player in the justice system. It is what it is. Mistakes are made, errors are made, and that is why you have a system of courts. You have the lower courts, the Court of Appeal, and of course the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council.
But how responsive should we be, Peter, in addressing some of the acts and the amendments?
Yes.
And because for me, even now, some of the crime that's happening in Jamaica, sometimes people feel like the sentences don't match.
Yes.
Some of them have been around, the acts have been around since 1920.
Yes, I agree with you.
So how responsive do we need to be as a society in our amendments, in addressing some of the things, in giving the judges the kind of teeth that they need, and the defense and the prosecution?
Yes, that's a very good question, Delia, and I think the response is this. In other jurisdictions, for instance, in England, you have what is known as the Law Reform Commission, where there's a particular commission that constantly review laws and get the participation of members of the public. I'm not so sure that we have that, or if we do, I'm not so sure how active it is. So it is instances like these and other forums where it's important to emphasize that we as Jamaicans, ordinary Jamaicans, need to play a part by letting our voices be heard in terms of the justice system, because it affects us. you can easily become a witness or a victim, God forbid, in the entire process. And without justice, there can be no real peace and prosperity.
Yeah. All right, we have to go.
Thank
It
you
was
so
a
much,
pleasure
sir.
to have you.
My
We wake
pleasure
you
and
up
honor.
early, but
Yes, you did. No coffee.
Attorney at law Peter Champagne, KC. Guys, we have to become active members of this society.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, some might say attorneys are good storytellers, but when we return from this break, we're celebrating World Storytelling Day. Stay with us.